I don't know who that is.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. Welcome back to our combined Bible study and book study. And today we're going to just look at the section that's called "If We Build It." I want to do just a little bit of house housekeeping kind of stuff before we get into it specifically. We have with today we have 6 sessions, so 5 more in front of us, and that fits perfectly with the remaining sections in the book. So next week we will look at the section called "Follow the Money." The following week, "Culture is the Context." The following week, "Changing the Rules." Following week, "Community Foremost," and then the transformation. In each of these, including today, I want to um, kind of allocate the time so that um, if we're in a in the midst of um, a discussion or something like that, I want to let it go. But if we get to a point where we've talked it out, um, I um, I want to, before we end, I want to pivot to what does our Christian perspective bring into the conversation, and again, recognizing that the author and the people that she interviews and other writers and so on are not necessarily coming from their position, or their perspective is not necessarily Christian, and it's certainly not presented in a kind of a Christian framework. And I hope that what we're able to do is to look at our tradition, our teaching, our theology, and say, where's the overlap between the concerns that are raised by the author and the contributors to this book and the concerns of the church. Um, Having said that, I want to acknowledge that when I was growing up in the church, stewardship of creation would have been kind of a foreign concept. We
Hmm?
just we just didn't talk about it. And it frankly, it wasn't just the church. It was the world, the society in America that we were raised in, that just took for granted the harvesting of the earth, or the mining, or however the the extraction from the earth of the stuff that we needed to build our civilization. And it was really only, well, it started in the early 1900s, but it really grew in the 60s and then the 70s and so on, into an understanding that the way of life that most, I would say, that we were raised in is non-sustainable and in fact harmful to the planet, and needs to be rethought before we just say that's the way it is. God wouldn't have created styrofoam if he didn't want us to have that luxury of being able to use all the things we can use styrofoam for, or plastic, and so on. So again, it's a fairly recent say in the last couple of generations, recognition that that we need to care for this planet better than we have for the last few generations. Or we will continue to see what we now see as the consequences of misusing the earth. We now know the consequences, and we're living with the consequences. And kind of the theme of this book is we can reverse that. And what are the things that we need to do or can do to reverse that? But again, the church that I was raised in had no ecology or in any kind of language about that. If you read, I would say a large percentage of the writings and the studies and the even books that have emerged over the last 20 years in theology and in Christianity more broadly, it's very much the care of the earth is a kind of a foundational principle or a foundational understanding that that informs our life as the church today. Does that make sense? Is there any response to that? Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the book itself. The section, if we build it. I lost my bookmark, but first of all, just looking at the 10 problems and 10 possibilities on page 88 and 89. Did any of those kind of jump out at you as being either surprising or particularly important?
Well, I would definitely say the plastic waste is a very big hardship for me. I go into the stores and I watch people load up with like cartons and cartons of plastic water bottles.
Mhm.
And, it's not that hard for people to use a reusable water bottle. And if only 9% of plastic waste is recycled, truly recycled, to me, that
Right.
is a very big hardship in the fact that we are creating all that plastic and, just going ahead and having it go into landfills or whatever. So to me, that the plastic for me, I just don't know why, but it just is, I just find it so wasteful. If people are, I'm sure there are people that don't have a good source of water, but I think most of us have a way to, to be able to fill a water bottle and reuse that.
Right.
And then the other thing,
I'm glad for you. Bye-bye. You're welcome.
and then the other thing was, I thought it was so interesting to see about designing steel structures that could possibly be disassembled and reused.
Like Tinker Toys, right?
Oh my gosh, what an amazing concept that was. Yeah. So those were the problem and the possibilities that stood out for me. So.
I thought, and I think it's in here. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's in one of the essays, so I might be jumping ahead. But oh yeah, this is the second one under the possibilities. 75% of the infrastructure that will be in place just 25 years from now hasn't even been built yet. So we have this, I mean, it's kind of the thesis of this book is we have learned over the years that there are different ways of building, different ways of designing, different materials that if we use them will be gentler on the planet, if not in fact part of the healing. And the fact that, again, 75% hasn't even been built yet, what a chance we have. But I'm sure, I'm sure the green, and I think this is addressed in, green technology is at this point more expensive.
As far as buildings, I know our granddaughter is in a college and studying architecture. And years ago, I'm sure there was no mention in architecture about its impact on the environment and what procedures, what uses, what elements of the actual structure were going to harm the environment, and we're going to last. But now that has changed dramatically. There are courses now in I know in architecture that also entail the sustainability of the different materials that go not only into the buildings, but the ground upon which they're built on. So
Yeah.
there's a big change in that direction. I mean, before I don't think there was any. Years ago, I don't think there was much at all, really.
Right. You just clear the land, put down the pilings, and put up the whatever building you're going to put up.
Well, and part of their impact today with our granddaughter is that don't just destroy all these buildings, but reuse and repurpose where you can.
Yeah.
And so we have some wonderful conversations with her on that subject. And it's lots of fun.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've always been a fan of reusing, particularly buildings. Go through even a real depressed area that has what once was a small department store, and say, wow, it's doing nothing now. What could it do?
What could go in that place?
Yeah.
Fortunately, within the city of Chicago, there are a number of neighborhoods that were very affluent for years and years, and then really went downhill. And then not all of a sudden, but gradually in many cases, are refurbished, improved, and the real estate values are up. And I'm sure there are a lot of things that
they've become very desirable.
Desirable.
Like,
I can name a number of them right off the.
Well, you probably remember. If you've been in Chicago, I've been here 50 years, I think, just under 50 years. But it was always up until about 15 years ago. It was always up and coming Logan Square. And Logan Square never up and came until like 15 years ago. And then all of a sudden it did mushroom. But for years, for a couple of generations, it was supposed to be the new Lincoln Park.
Well, yeah, that happened. And years ago, that's where my father lived. His father was in the construction business, and they lived in Logan Square, and that was like the place. That was like Barrington or
Right,
Inverness.
right.
And
And
then it went downhill, and then here it is back up again.
and when
It's
you go
been
through
very
Logan,
desirable.
yeah,
Yeah.
go through Logan Square and you see these really beautiful,
Oh, yeah.
beautiful houses, and know that for maybe 50 years or so, they were subdivided into 7 or 8 apartments.
They were, yeah.
Yeah, they were.
And then, again, the gentrification came and these were being restored into, I would call them mansions. I don't know. That's a subjective,
We refer to them as
But definitely,
McMansions.
definitely upscale.
yeah.
Yeah.
And any other comments on the 10 possibilities or the 10 problems?
One of the problems that stood out to me, and this is, as Dan knows, I'm doing a project for Augsburg Fortress and looking at health related to climate and some other things. But the thing about low income neighborhoods in the US have an average 15% less tree cover. Not only does that impact heat, but it impacts health. Mental health is hugely impacted by among people who don't have enough tree cover. So just the whole thought again of when we build a lot and cut down trees and don't replace them, we're impacting a lot more than just the heat that's involved from no shade, but a lot of other health issues as well.
I also, and this is back to the 75% of the infrastructure that will be here in 25 years hasn't been built yet. And kind of our chance to do it right, kind of the the whole idea of the book, do it right this time. I was listening to an interview of people whose houses burned down, and then out in Los Angeles, and then also their neighbors whose house didn't burn down. But the question is whether with all of the toxic stuff that was in all of those houses that burned, can the houses that were raining, that stuff was raining on them for days and days and days, are those houses safe now? And they say the air quality index, kind of the official, is the air clean or not, tells you the clearness of the air. It doesn't tell you the makeup of the air. And there could very well be, and they're saying, some really nasty chemicals that are just part of the air in some areas.
Well, and I would guess they're permeating the homes that exist.
Right.
And right now, today, we don't even know to what degree that is an issue. They can
Right.
monitor the air, but they're not able yet to monitor the house that survived.
Right.
How damaged is that?
Anything else on the 10 problems or 10 possibilities? Terry, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any comments? I know you're muted.
I do not.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we don't pass you by.
No, don't worry, I won't let you.
Well, I have
All right.
one on the 10 possibilities, the
Okay.
thing about building with wood instead of concrete and steel. That was kind of a red flag for me because I did attend a webinar about the Chicago fire, and one of the things they said that was a big problem was everything, including sidewalks, was made out of wood. So
Right.
I don't know, that one I kind of would.
I
I had
think-
a hard time with that also.
Yeah.
I think
One of the
it was,
hurricanes, it was one of the
I th-
hurricanes in Florida that there was this guy who had his home built up 2 stories,
Oh, yeah.
and it was all concrete and steel, and the lower level was unoccupied, designed to let the water come in.
Yeah.
when they have hurricanes, and then the water can go out and it doesn't destroy his house. That wouldn't happen if you had wood. It would all be rotting
Mm.
and quickly, I think. So, yeah, I'm with you, Karen. That I struggled with that one.
Yeah.
That seemed, that also to me seemed, not counterintuitive.
Right, yeah.
But I think one of the interviews in this section gets into the point and makes the argument, kind of fleshes out this argument in favor of wood construction. And they recognize it's not for everywhere. So probably for stilts in the tidewater or whatever, no. And also that there are fireproofing techniques, natural fireproofing techniques that make it less of a danger than we would think of as wood construction.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that. Neighborhoods and landscapes. Anyone have a kind of an opening salvo on this section? I liked that in that very first paragraph where the author, before she goes into the interview, where she talks about having seen dirt under the street where there was pothole or construction going on, and kind of noticing for the first time that the street was built on dirt, on earth. Kind of like if you went out to a farm and saw the dirt, it's the same thing. It's been built on. But I like how she ends that also. Now, decades later, I find myself pondering what it means to live not on top of nature or with it, but within it. Kind of being, I mean, it's an old phrase, being a part of nature. But it seems to me, very appropriate for us to reconsider our relationship to nature. Is it in our best interest to try to control nature? I mean, we have, again, over the last 150 years or so, we have so-called tamed major rivers. The Columbia River, the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, the Missouri River. And, and one can make an argument for what was then understood to be the benefit of doing that. But we are now in an era where many of those infrastructure projects from 100 years ago, 75 years ago, or so on, are being recognized as long-term harmful to the environment in which they were placed. And for instance, dams in the West in particular are in the process of being, many of them being undone to let the rivers run wild again. And that's just, what was the figure that I saw in her out of 500 miles of waterfront in New York Harbor, almost all of that is artificial waterfront, that it's embankments. They long ago tamed the wetlands that used to be where the land and the ocean met. And now we've filled that up with structures and stuff and houses and businesses and so on. And to keep that steady, we've built these embankments to try to keep the ocean from coming, or whatever the body of water is, from coming into where we've taken the land away from the ocean. Any other comments on the neighborhoods and landscapes? Or what did you highlight as you went through it?
Well, I think what I noticed is that, much like when we talked a little bit about the architecture, that we sort of had an arrogant view of building and thinking whatever we built was right and it would withstand, and it didn't matter what was around it. And that seemed to be an attitude that was disastrous when it was near water, near oceans, in places where a lot of damage could be done. And then as the article went on, it sort of was explaining how we could be more in tune with, the environment that was there and try to build in a way that was beneficial to both the land structure, but also incorporating people into that and making people be part of it. It mentioned doing some work at a waterfront and having people participate in activities in that space to gain ownership of it. So it sort of is a total opposite. Initially building with disregard for whatever was there, thinking that the structures would survive, everything would be fine, and then recognizing that isn't the way to go, and then actually trying to be more thoughtful, and then just getting the community to be part of that. It's just it's such a turnaround and so
Right.
appropriate for how I think it should be. So that's what I sort of took from that particular article. So
Yeah, I liked how she talked about their going in and finding out kind of in that community how they wanted their environment to be,
right.
recognizing the limits. They live next to the ocean. Okay,
Right.
they're and so on. What would they like? And how do we get there in a way that is responsible? Other comments? I highlighted on page 94, and we've inherited the work of when we've talked about this before, we inherited the work of a different generation. And I'm not willing to accept the world as it is now as given. That was bunches of decisions made by bunches of people over a long period of time, very few of which were evil intent. I mean, I suppose I imagine there are some kind of the stereotypical, the factory that emptied its refuse directly into a river or something like that. But I think that's very early on, one would have known that was evil, that was wrong. But again, the mindset that we had as we conquered this continent was it has unlimited water, unlimited whatever, whatever the land could produce. And all we had to do was harvest it. And that turned out not to work out so well for us. And that the end of that same thought, she says, this is Kate, yeah, we can repair and heal what has been lost. We don't have to accept the past as the status quo that has to be maintained. In fact, it has to be remedied. I think it's important, and this gets a little bit political, but I'm going to try to walk a fine line here. This might sound like we are blaming the entrepreneurs and farmers and industrialists of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and that we're trying to now put blame on them in a way that kind of changes the American narrative of progress. We're always getting better. I mean, that's kind of the American myth that, with each generation, we're getting better. So I'm not blaming, and I don't think she's blaming previous generations. For the most part, they made good faith decisions. It just turns out that the consequences were not good. We're living with those consequences, and we're now, having identified them, we're committed to trying to mitigate them, overcome them. And it's not a blame game. It's a name the facts, analyze it, figure out the possibilities, and go forward. Any comments? I absolutely loved this quote from Cornel West. It's on the top of page 95. Justice is what love looks like in public. It's how you act. It's not what you say you believe. It's how you act in the world, how we as a society act with one another in the world, in public. And I really love the close association of justice and love. It's not, those aren't kind of opposite kind of concepts. They are kind of flip sides of the same coin. Any comments or other things that you all highlighted?
I guess one of the important things I noticed was that on page 96, she said that I realize that our social lives and our connectedness to each other are going to do as much to protect us from whatever risks we face as any physical project. So just the piece of people working together, noticing it, the social movement. I thought it was also interesting, even if people lived in a place that was a risk environment, they wouldn't want to move because all their social and cultural experiences are there, how important that is. So I just think that it seems like this particular chapter is just reflective of looking out for each other, love for each other, connecting with each other, because really, if you want change, and if you think of things that are important to you and you get involved in some type of movement and you're with those people that believe that, it sort of empowers you to, for change and to know that you can make a difference. So I think that those were sort of important concepts besides just the work of correcting the errors we've made taking care of our earth. So
I don't know if she talks about any of this, but with all these fires now, we hear a lot of people saying we're going to rebuild because this is where we've lived and this is what we want, even if it means that it's on, one of the problems that I think that California has, at least from things I've heard recently, is it's often where they build. They build on top of cliffs, and they build on on top of hillsides, and because they want the beauty of whatever that is that's there. And people in other parts of the country do that too, to the detriment of the land and maybe ultimately their houses. And I don't know if she talks about, if she addresses any of that, but that is a problem.
Yeah.
Terry, I agree with you that is right. Several years ago, we had this major flood through the whole Midwest, the Missouri River and the Mississippi River.
I remember that.
My sister lives in Sioux City, Iowa, and there's an area along the Missouri River. It's technically in South Dakota, that is a floodplain. And it was totally developed into these beautiful homes because it'll never flood. Well, then comes this flood and it does. And all of these homes they were destroyed. Every one of them. People couldn't get out fast enough. And it's just so sad to see that happen. Why did we build on a floodplain in the first place?
Yeah.
Developers could get a lot of money, I guess.
right.
Yeah.
Sad.
Anything else? Anything else? Anyone have something else highlighted? It's toward on like 113 or something that they talk about the initiatives of the citizens giving rise to what they're referred to as restorative designs. Any other comments?
And the next chapter.
How about the next chapter? The artificial intelligence deluge.
Did we talk about design for a changing world already, or did I miss that?
Oh, did I skip that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, I skipped that. Sorry about that.
Because the big thing I highlighted there is what Janice was talking about earlier about recycling and plastics and all that at the top of page 106.
I know.
Comparing us to Germany or Italy, where they've got bins for every single thing, and really makes you stop and think where you put things. And I think I would guess then a bit more confidence that things will be handled the way they say they're going to.
Right. I know.
We take all of our plastic recycling to over here on Central Road to Public Works,
Uh-huh.
where they have a couple of bins for plastic recycling, because I have great confidence that from there it actually goes to recycling. I'm
Do they-
not so sure that it does if you take it to a grocery store.
Yeah.
Well, a lot
Do
of
they-
people now don't know, but in the Man Prospect, you can now recycle styrofoam.
Right.
And styrofoam at one point was just thrown into the regular refuse.
Right.
Now they grind it up and, of course, make more styrofoam, but at least it doesn't go into the landfill.
Right. Do they have in the recycling, in the plastic recycling, do they have you sort it at all? Or is
It's
it
already-
just
No,
one
they-
bid?
It's already sorted.
There's a couple of bins where you can put your plastic.
Yeah, there's
recycling.
there's two bins for plastic recycling. Then there's one for batteries, then there's one for sharps. And there's about 6 or 7. There's about 7 or 8 different places where you can put it in the box. you know.
In the appropriate bin, yeah.
Yeah. in the
You're
appropriate
saying
bin.
plastic as in, are you talking plastic bags or are you talking?
Plastic bags.
Okay, yeah.
Any
And
kind
plastic
of
container,
plastic.
plastic
Plastic
containers.
containers can go in our recycling,
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Right.
Yeah,
like a plastic
regular-
water bottle.
Your regular
So this is
curbside.
like the bags that you take to the grocery store where they have the bins and don't know what's going to happen to them.
Right.
mhm.
I had an
It kind of depends, I've heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've kind of heard that with the plastic bag recycling at grocery stores, it kind of depends who cleans that bin out. Some people get it to the recycling bin and others just put it wherever.
I had a thought today. I was at the grocery store, took my reusable bags, but also had a set of the plastic bags in the trunk that I took in and put in that bin. Then I did my grocery shopping, checked out with my reusable bags, but they still had to put, a few things in their plastic bags. And I thought, okay, when I put my groceries away, I thought, I'm just going to put those plastic bags in with my reusable bags and take them back into the store when I shop next time and see if they'll reuse their own plastic
they'll-
bags or if they say, no, you've got to throw them away. I thought I've never thought about trying
And
that.
that's a good idea to try it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that, go ahead, Janice.
Oh, I was just going to say that is a really good idea because it seems like no matter how I explain I want everything in my reusables, somehow they just do not want to do that all the time. But I'm sort of, Mount Prospect is really good about having some locations for us to, for instance, by the Park District right next to the church, there's a place to just recycle paper. So in other words, if you have newspapers or papers that you don't need anymore, you can put all those papers in a bag, and there's two sort of structures where you can just put these paper items. It's not supposed to be cardboard or anything else, just paper. And that's sort of nice because when you put them in your recycling bin, sometimes it can, be flying around and things. Also in our recycling bin, we're not supposed to put plastic bags, but yet because I walk often, I see so many people loading a plastic bag with
Yeah.
all of their recyclables.
Yeah.
And
which
putting it
is
in the
Putting it in
receptacle.
there.
exactly what you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Okay, then I did just make this trip and I really encourage anyone who's in this position, because I am a book lover, I have tons of books. I still had some old textbooks in my house, and I found Books for a Cause, and it's located in Lincolnwood. And they will take any of your books, paperback books, hardbound books. If the books are usable, they either can go to Chicago, some even go to Africa. If they can't use the books because they're too old or whatever, they recycle them. And so they used to be located in Skokie, and I arranged for a huge shipment from our school at Westbrook. But now I just went over there with probably, I don't know how many boxes of books that I no longer was using, and know that they will either be going to a cause that will use the books, or if they find that they're not going to be able to use them, they will recycle them. So I'm always seeking out like how to when I do my clean outs, which I have much to do yet, finding ways to, get things in
Then
places that will
They
be.
will get recycled.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Used properly, yes.
It's awesome. It's a really good place to go. So, yeah. So anyway, but I'm always trying to recycle everything, but recycling takes longer than throwing everything.
If
It
you
does.
recycle properly, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because things are supposed to be clean, washed out, dry, it's not, and it's sometimes, you're like, okay, should I recycle this? It's like,
And yeah, and if you're like me, you make compromises.
oh yeah, yeah, I know.
I say I mostly recycle, but
Right.
I didn't want to
There-
clean. I
There are
didn't
a
want
few
to clean
things that
this
aren't gonna make
yogurt.
it.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. But fabric is a big thing. So in other words,
Any textiles are,
Yeah,
it's
That would be-
awful.
yeah, it would be best if you can find a way to get that either to a Goodwill if it's still a usable item, or find a way that it can be recycled too. So
There is that
Actually,
Hawthorne Mall, a place for textile recycling. It's a bin you can drop off.
oh,
Where is
the
that,
bin-
Karen?
the bin in the
Hawthorne.
church parking lot.
okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
Bin in the church parking lot
Will
is
they take recycling?
they
Textile?
they take recycling clothes, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Clothes and shoes, and in both cases, kind of what Janice was saying, if the clothes can be resold, then they're bundled in bulk and go to places where people will. I mean, everyone has seen people running around in a village in Africa with a Michael Jordan t-shirt. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah,
and that's how they get them.
right.
Or those that can't be remarketed
Right.
are environmentally. We studied this at the church council before we approved
Oh,
this.
great.
They environmentally unravel or shred the cloth, the fabric, and then there's some use that is put to, and I can't remember. It might be something as simple as making some reusable bags or something like that. I can't remember what that end product is, but it's environmentally sensitive, and it's reuse of something that if I agree, if you give it to a charity and it can be used again, that's wonderful. This one will do that, but there's also I suspect that all of those charities have some contractor to whom they give their unusable stuff.
I would think so.
Otherwise, it would be just going to the landfill,
Yeah.
which I don't.
Well, and if you throw textile into your trash, it goes to the landfill and it never breaks. It takes thousands of years for it to break down. It just
Yeah.
doesn't. It does not break down.
Especially the polyester.
Yeah.
What this section is the interview closes with what I think is kind of along what you all have just been talking about, and that's the not the great big huge things like passing the Clean Air Act, which had a huge impact, but it took millions of people working on it over quite a few years to get it passed. Big impact, a lot of work to get it done. What this guy says at the bottom of 117 is, I want to remind people that individual single acts, kind of repeated over and over and over again, are also impactful. And it's not in either big or minuscule. And it's more kind of like what I heard among you was thinking about other ways of being more responsible, and just kind of keeping that in your mind. Doesn't mean looking at labels and seeing what it's made of, and making decisions that have value, that are not just about this one's $6.99, this one's $5.99. I'm going to buy the $5.99 one if you can afford. Now I understand it's kind of like people say, everybody should eat all organic food, and everybody would be better off than they are with all this processed food. If you're existing kind of hand to mouth, that processed food extends your groceries budget quite a lot farther than having fresh fruit and vegetables in your diet as recommended on a regular basis. So it kind of depends on, we love to get organic stuff because we think it's better for us and we can afford it. We've only got a few more minutes, but let's go into this, the AI. Frankly, any discussion of artificial intelligence just makes my head spin. That and crypto, I don't have the slightest understanding of any of this. I sometimes think I was born a little bit too late. I should have been born earlier before it got this complicated. But hey, it wasn't my
Artificial
choice.
intelligence is in our lives, whether we like it or not.
That's
and
true.
It's doing a lot of things that we're probably not even aware of.
Well, I can tell you, right now, it's very helpful for somebody like me because we have smart glasses that allow us, and apps on our phones that allow us to interact with AI in a very helpful way that probably most people aren't even aware of. And this has really come to fruition in the past, not even a full year, 6 to 7 months, 8 months. And we have these wonderful smart glasses that can, and now we have them. They were originally developed for sighted people, the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, smart glasses. They were initially developed for people who are sighted, but they've really taken the blind community by storm since about February of last year and March, and now Meta is putting more effort into adding features to them that are specifically helpful to somebody who is blind or visually impaired. So, you know, right now I have a huge appreciation for AI. I worry about what it could become, because you read all these things about all the evil intentions and how AI is going to overtake human responses to things, and you know, because there are bad people out there. I mean, that's why we have all these problems with our identities and money and whatever being stolen. It's all on the internet, and there are companies, there are countries who pay people to do this, you know. And I worry that some of that could happen with AI, but right now, I mean, for me, it's a wonderful thing.
I
At
just,
least the parts of it that I can use.
That's
I heard,
awesome.
go ahead, Cheryl.
Oh, that's what Terry is sharing
Oh,
is
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. I heard a story on NPR today, that there's a newspaper in a small town in Idaho that went out of business 2 years ago, and has someone, and they couldn't identify who it was, but some foreign player has continued to publish this newspaper for the last 2 years, completely making up stories,
Oh,
but it's using AI, and it's importing stories from other sources, translating them into English, and putting it out as the local newspaper. And people are, because of the NPR story that just busted them, people in that town are saying, I wondered why that, it just seemed weird.
Oh,
The
that-
newspaper had
Oh.
gotten weird.
that's so
that's
sad.
unbelievable. Well, I'll tell you, I don't really understand what AI is. I am rather confused by the whole thing, but I did hear the medical component could be so good. In
Yep.
terms of medical advancements, if physicians in other places are doing a procedure to resolve a medical issue,
Mm.
that information will be so available for other physicians to use and build off of. But
Mhm.
I have someone that's very dear to me that's constantly fighting cancer, and they were explaining how you could have these tiny little cancer cells in your blood before you actually have the cancer settle into one particular area, and they could find these, and then they could develop a vaccine in like 2 days to then counteract that cancer. I mean,
Yeah, I've heard of that too.
I know, I
Yeah.
don't really know if this is all true, but it does seem like for medical purposes, it could
Oh,
be.
it could be a really good
There
thing.
are, with AI, there are wonderful opportunities with it.
Yeah. But
If
then
we could
again,
just
as
keep the
everyone
It's
says,
bad people
ones that
away.
aren't so wonderful that frighten us all.
right,
Right.
of course. Of
Yeah.
course, just like everything else in this world right now,
Yep.
there's so many people that do use the internet, the resources for good. And then there's all those people that use it for, to take advantage of people or whatever. And I know I see both of those things, but I don't really, as I said, understand all of this. So it's a little in the future for me because not really what I
It's
understand.
out there in space somewhere.
It's what
Yeah.
We are at our closing time. Does anybody, and my sense is that we kind of wove the understanding of stewardship of creation and what kind of our particular Christian perspective into the conversation earlier, and don't need to kind of segregate that. But I'm open to if anyone has a closing comment or observation.
I just wonder if she's talked at all about Well, I'm very aware now of all these buildings in the UK and in New Zealand and in Australia that are, you know, hundreds of years old because they don't just, well, this building is 50 years old, so let's tear it down and build something else. They're there for all these years and they're structurally sound. And I'm talking about people's houses even.
Mhm.
Does she talk about any of that and address our propensity to just tear things down after X number of years because we think they should be? And it's better to, we think it's better to tear it down and just rebuild from scratch rather than just trying to maintain it and or build things so they're structurally sound to begin with.
Right.
Does she talk about that in
I
here?
think yeah, go ahead, Janice.
Yeah, there is one quote that I said, it was 100% on 114. It said, what I find outrageous is that so many buildings get demolished to make room for new buildings before they are finished their life for reasons of
Mhm.
profit or expedience. That's
Right.
a senseless waste. Yeah.
Okay.
So
good.
yeah, she does
I'm
like
glad
say,
she's addressing that.
yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments? Thank you very much for your participation. Next week,
Mhm.
we will gather, same time, same space, same place. And we're going to be following the money. This should be a good one. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everybody.
Good night.